welcome to another bonus episode of Talking with Friends, so that we can talk a little bit more about Rings of Power. So today we're going to give our best guess for the events of the show. We know that there's going to be time compression things that change that, but if you're a part of the group that doesn't want to know anything going in, I've seen several of that on Twitter and TikTok, where you don't want to know anything about the show, you're just excited that we're going back to Middle Earth. This might not be the episode for you.
Yeah.
But like and follow anyway. But we will also discuss some of the things that we hope to see on the show, from characters and storylines to maybe even Lord of the Rings or Silmarillion references. So now, I may not have Callie or Anna with me today, but we're very happy to welcome back Nick to the podcast. Hi, Nick.
Hi.
And I hope you will also join me in welcoming a very special guest, my husband, Josh. So
Hello.
Josh has been a part of every episode, whether you knew about it or not. So I'm glad that you finally get to hear from him. Hi, Josh.
Hello.
So, Nick, people know to follow you at Fornost42. Josh, do you want anybody to follow you anywhere?
I guess my social medias are all JoshTheComposer, as one word. I do off and on educational music content, but I haven't done it in a while. But maybe this will be the kick in the rear to actually start doing that again.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, we've mentioned the time compression.
Yes.
So the series of events is probably going to change, but I wanted to just kind of give a primer on what the series is even supposed to be about, because for a long time, it was just called Lord of the Rings. And then finally it was called Rings of Power.
Yeah.
So it's I think a lot of people, at least in the beginning, did think it had something to do with Lord of the Rings, the novels and the movies. And it's not that it doesn't, because we do know there's a lot of returning characters, but this is a prequel, this is the before, and so, to set it up, I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, but I did write, 2 pages of notes on this.
That's enough.
So there's a whole lot of history of Middle Earth that we probably won't even touch on, but there's several ages, and the Lord of the Rings is in the Third Age. It's primarily the end of the Third Age, because the end of Sauron and the coming of Aragorn to Gondor is the beginning of the Fourth Age. But there is, in fact, a First Age, which we won't go into, but it ends with a giant battle, and nearly everyone on Earth against Morgoth, who we have talked about before, so I'm just going to assume that you know who that is. And so that's the Valar, the lesser gods of Tolkien's world, the elves, and there are men involved, but particularly 3 houses of men, these 3 families that are supporting the elves, and ultimately the land that the battle takes place on is destroyed, leaving us, more or less, with the version of the Middle-earth map that we know from Lord of the Rings. However, these 3 houses of men that we talked about, they are gifted their own island nation of Numenor. And it's and they also get an extremely long lifespan, anywhere from 300 to 500 years, depending on.
Yeah, Arnold lived to 480 or something. No, 510 years old, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
The first
I know somebody got to 500.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Elros. And then other people were almost there for the first 1,000 years, but we'll get into that.
Yes. So, and then we have, I think at this point, a lot of elves leave and go to Valinor because they're no. And then the rest of the elves who stay in Middle Earth, they are founding the Grey Havens and Lindon, and basically as far west as you can go on the Middle Earth map that we know. Our dwarf friends, they make for Khazad-dûm, or Moria as it's later known, and they make it the greatest dwarvish city we've ever seen.
Yes.
Which is, it's going to be sick. some of the our elves also, and notice I'm not like putting dates on this because it's going to be pointless to know with the time compression.
Right.
Some of our elves, particularly Celebrimbor, who we've started to see, promo shots of. He is going to found the area of Eregion, where in the Lord of the Rings books is where the Fellowship was attacked by wolves. It's the area, they also call it Holland, and it's neighbor to Moria, to our friends, the dwarves. And according to the timeline in the appendices of Return of the King, about 1,000 years in is when Sauron, alarmed by the growing power of the Numenorians, decides to make Mordor his stronghold. He needs like a base. So that's Sauron. He's lurking a boot, but he doesn't do anything. So he starts making moves about 1,000 years in. I know for a fact from like the trailers we've seen that they are not going to give him 1,000 years to wait around to start making moves.
Nope.
But that's for your reference. And soon he decides to seduce the Eldar, aka the elves that we know of. And I don't, whatever. I'm not even going to get into all the different elves, like what these words mean. But this is how Tolkien puts it. So Gil-galad refuses him, and Gil-galad at this time is the High King of the elves. Is it specifically the Noldor? Actually, it doesn't matter.
Well, we can get into that, whether it matters or not, but let's keep going here. But that's a good point. Whether he's the High King of all elves or just the Noldor matters.
Yeah.
Or how they're going to split up events with elves. So anyway,
right.
Keep going.
Right. But at this point, if you're taking notes, like Gil-galad, I say his name different every time. It's going to be like a Star Wars situation, or it's like Han Solo and Han Solo.
100%.
Like,
and okay, to use the Stephen Colbert logic, I think Gil-galad scans in the song, but like, I'm a Gil-galad pronounce.
Yeah.
It rolls off the tongue better when you're just talking.
Yeah, and it's like, Gil is, I don't know, there's like a hyphen.
Right?
So Gil-galad refuses him. Good job. And then, but the elves of Eregion, bringing back Celebrimbor, they're won over, is how the appendices puts it. And so this is where we get into the title of the show. It's the creation of the Rings of Power. But not 3 rings for Elven Kings Under the Sky quite yet. They're just like making rings. I feel like the idea is like, I'm vibing, you're vibing, like let's learn from each other. And so we don't have the 3 elvish rings, because honestly none of these rings belong to anybody yet. And then nor the one. So Sauron takes a little break from chilling with Celebrimbor, and he goes back to Mordor to create the One Ring. Celebrimbor, in the meantime, makes the 3. As soon as Sauron completes the 1, Celebrimbor is aware of what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so he hides the 3 rings from Sauron, and the elves go to war with him. And eventually, the Numenorians come in to save the day, but before they do, Eregion is laid waste, Celebrimbor is killed, and it's pretty gnarly. Not in the appendices, but I just know that it is. And the gates of Moria are shut, which is so... Even just that phrase sounds devastating to me.
It does. Because when you hear it talked about, you imagine them being like open, the east and the west gates, and people are just passing freely through, and it's a prosperous commerce and, exchange between cultures. And nope, now doors are shut.
Doors are shut.
The way is shut.
That's the vibe. And Elrond retreats with what remains of the Noldor to Rivendell. So Rivendell starts at some point during all of this, and this is where they retreat to it. And then, so Numenorians show up, and Sauron is defeated. There is peace for a while, and this is where, like, the Numenorians are flourishing. They're doing the most, right? And they also begin establishing dominions on the coast of Middle-earth. And so, when we think about Numenorians, I think the biggest thing to me is, like, the architecture, like Orthanc, Minas Tirith, even the Morannon, the Black Gates, Minas Morgul. There's so many things that are like amazing that they did, and I don't even think that with the Dominion on the coast that they've necessarily built all these things quite yet.
Right.
So it's going to be cool to see.
It is
what they do with Numenor. But so while they're making, doing stuff on the coast and doing whatever they're doing in Numenor, Sauron extends his power eastwards, which, based on the maps that the show has started to put out, we're definitely going to see whatever that means.
Yeah.
And so now, if you want to check in on the timeline, we're like 1,800 years into it. And this is when the shadow begins to fall on Numenor. And, this is where they're starting to be like, what we've got isn't enough. I want to live forever type of problems.
Yeah.
And this, because of them thinking this way, they start to die sooner. And so it becomes more of a problem. And, we see them start to turn away from the elves and the Valar at the same time. And so, we'll start to see a division between the Numenorians. I definitely know the show is going to get into this, where you have the faithful who are, like, still into the elves, and then the Kingsmen who are not. They want to do their own thing. We also see the Nazgul first appear around 2251 of the Second Age. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
But you can kind of see, like, how long all of these events are taking with these dates. So then Numenor has the Civil War. Ar-Pharazôn takes the scepter. We'll talk about why that might be different in a minute. But so he becomes the king, and he is the worst, and is also obsessed with his own power and, like, wanting to live forever, like, peak dummy. Yeah. And Sauron knows he's a guy. Sauron understands Pharazôn probably more than he understands anybody else. And so Sauron is like, cool, this guy's in power. I'm going to proclaim myself the king of all men, and then Pharazôn is like, absolutely not. And so he challenges Sauron, but Sauron knows he doesn't have the forces at this point to fight him. So he's like, oh no, you got me. And he takes him to Numenor, which is obviously all part of his plan. He becomes a counselor to Pharazôn, and basically, like, full cult status achieved. Like, people start worshiping Morgoth, they're doing human sacrifices, and he's really egging on the king to try to take back immortality from the Valar. Yes. Because, as we haven't mentioned, because it's most relevant now, is that when the Valar created Numenor, they were like, you have this great place, but you cannot ever step foot in Valinor. Like, you are banned. And because they are tired. And nobody was supposed to go there in the First Age. Anyway, that happens, but anyway. But it's still technically accessible by boat. Like, Valinor is still a part of Arda. It's still part of the world. Yes. But they're forbidden to go there. Sauron convinces Pharazôn that he can take the immortality, the same as the elves did. And this, in turn, causes the destruction of Numenor. Oops.
Spoiler.
But then I know. And then it's like, the timeline gets super short at this point, where it's just like a few of the faithful, a.k.a. Elendil and his sons, Isildur and Anarion. There are more, but, like, these are our guys, right? They escape the fall of Numenor and create the realms that we do know. Arnor, which is, like, west of the Misty Mountains, and Gondor, which is east of the Misty Mountains. And eventually, Sauron loses his body. He flies back to Mordor and kind of, does some thinking. And eventually, we will get to the last alliance of elves and men.
Yes. So,
in less than 15 minutes, that is the Second Age of Middle-earth.
You did good. So, okay, there were a couple of things that we were like, yeah, let's not talk about that yet. But no, let's go back and talk about it. So, for one thing, the Second Age is 3,441 years long.
Right.
We are not going to see 3,000, almost 3,500 years in 5 seasons. There's just no way. Especially because we know people who are alive, who only live a couple hundred years, are alive at the end of that timeline, and they're alive at the start of the show. So
exactly. So I think so characters that we've for sure seen in the promos. We've got Gil-galad, we've got Celebrimbor, we've got Elrond, we've got Galadriel, we have Durin, and our dwarves. They haven't, Adisa, who's new. And we have, as far as the Numenorians, we have Miriel, and we have Farazan already. So we're not. I'm guessing
Isildur, but he's so.
Elendil and Isildur there, and then he also has a sister now, which is great.
I'm into it. Yeah, I mean, I hope that she gets to do something bad. If she's replacing his brother, I hope she's just as badass.
Yeah.
In the Battle of the Last Alliance, because
agree.
That's a sweet moment, and she deserves it. She deserves like an Eowyn moment almost.
Yeah.
That being really, really cool. But that's thinking into the 5th season probably. So
yeah, for sure. So we've got Miriel and Farazan, like everything's already, and I think that her dad is, so she's like Queen Regent in the show. I think her dad is just sick, but he's like one of the last of like the faithful kings. And then Farazan, I'm guessing it's going to be like a coup situation because he's being portrayed as like a counselor type of guy. Not necessarily a part of the, I'm sure he is like nobility in some way, shape, or form, but he's not like in the line of succession as far as the way they're presenting it.
Her first cousin, at least canonically. So creepy vibes, even for medieval times. Pretty creepy. But also, I want to say that he's from a line that, if they had done things the very traditional human route, when a king didn't have a son, it would pass to someone else in his line, not his daughter. But in Numenor, the daughters succeeded. The first one was pretty early on, 1,000 years in. 1075, Tar Ankalime becomes the first ruling queen of Numenor. So,
and that's because her dad decided to change it, right?
Correct. So pre her, they did the more traditional think England, pass it on to his brother or his nephew or something like that. And then her father says, "Nope, she's badass. Let's have her step in." And that shifted the line. And I'm pretty sure Farazan came from the line that would have been king had they not done this. I could be misremembering, so don't quote me on that. But I'm pretty sure that's where he concocts some feigned believability of I am owed this.
Sure, I feel like he's gonna do some, because he's definitely gonna be one of the king's men or whatever. And
yes.
I feel like I think we're still gonna probably get the Civil War part of it, but
I hope so.
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna be like Miriel being stuck between a rock and the hard place, because they're in the trailers we've seen Galadriel and her talking together and her being like, "Fight with me."
Yes.
So I feel like some of the conflict there might be like, nah, but then maybe they do. I don't know. It's interesting to think about the smushing, right? Because we're already hearing Sauron's name in the trailers and stuff, but the rings aren't.
The rings aren't even. They haven't even hinted at the rings. So let's talk about big picture timeline for a second, because I'm kind of seeing this as the first third to half is getting folded into the second half of it, and then even that's going to be compressed because, again, all the people who are alive at the end are alive at the beginning. But I think we're going to see the smushing of the wars with Sauron potentially. So instead of him destroying Eregion, murdering Celebrimbor, all of that, and then maintaining power without really being challenged until the Numenorians challenge him, I think all of that's just going to happen in one. There's just going to be one war where Celebrimbor dies, Sauron gains a lot of power, and then feigns not being strong enough, maybe, but that doesn't make sense either. I don't know. And then I am a firm believer in the chance of us getting a Witcher-esque multiple timelines happening at once. And my argument for that, well, I could go off on that. I think I talked about that on the last bonus episode. But I think that, so the shot of the meteor and everyone looks up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think everyone is actually looking at the meteor in the show. I think that was we're cutting.
It's cut.
Yeah, like Galadriel's on a boat sailing into the what's the line in the what's the title of the song in the soundtrack?
Hold on. Jeff, do you remember?
Sailing into the dawn.
Mm.
So we know that's like the start. So maybe she's just the first one to see the meteor, or she's looking at something completely different. And that just happened to be her shot. And then you could say the same thing. We know for a fact the Harfoots see it because Nori goes up to the stranger, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Stuff. But, like, my reason for saying that is I think that's meant to imply to us that it's all happening at the same time. But specifically, the stuff that's going to happen in the South and the East, I think that's happening way ahead of the stuff that we're seeing with Numenor and Galadriel.
Mm.
So that we get this, like, we kind of get Sauron or representatives of Sauron in two places.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I could see that.
But poke my theory, please.
I don't know. I think it's going to be so interesting to see how they do it, because there's obviously a lot of options, right?
Yes.
And we know that the cast is huge. We've got Arondir and Bronwyn, and they're kind of like, hey, I know that they put up a map, and they're kind of like close to Mordor. So I don't know. That'll be interesting. I'm also just thinking of like Josh from someone who has religiously watched the movies with me like multiple times a year. What kind of references do you hope they make?
Yeah, that's one thing. Like, I think that's one thing in general that they need to like keep in mind, and I'm guessing they are keeping in mind, is that they need to make like really clever connections to the films that Peter Jackson made. And I know that like they're not going to be anything like Peter Jackson's films, and they shouldn't be probably, but like they should make clever connections to them. And one thing I've been thinking about is I think it would be so cool if there were an origin story for the Mouth of Sauron and we follow that character. And I'm convinced that the blonde guy is him, but that's just because it's funny to say that. The guy that looks like Eminem is the Mouth of Sauron, and he's going to like, rise to being like the general of Sauron or whatever.
I love it.
But I like connections like that connect to the films, rather than just like staying within the appendices and the books or whatever. I think that would be really cool, and that would make the show like really successful for everyone. I think if we have like these kind of like Star Wars-esque like references to things that happen later in the films,
Mm-hmm.
I think they have to do something like that for the show to be really well received overall.
I agree.
Yeah, because they have to know that, like, so there's gonna be a sect of people, I think, that probably are just like fantasy, but maybe they weren't into Lord of the Rings. Like, that's gonna be a group of people watching the show. But I think the biggest base point of knowledge is gonna be the Peter Jackson movies, and so they're not. I mean, they already are doing. I mean, they've got Weta involved. Howard Shore did the main title theme. Like, right. They're not referencing the movies, right? So I agree with that. I think that what we evidence from like Return of the King shows that the Mouth of Sauron has a unnaturally long life anyway. So I think with the folding of the timelines, like getting him in there wouldn't be too hard. We definitely are going to see some Nazgulification, which
God, yes, please.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be really cool. I mean, if they have to, right? Like they're explicitly stated in the timeline, and who doesn't
want to see
the Naz? Yeah, like they're.
But that's almost an argument for the multiple timelines, because if you try to do Nazgul just in the last, like, let's be generous and give them like 50 years to cover or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, it takes thousands of years or over 1,000 years for the Nazgul to be stretched like wire. I think that's how the analogy is used in or the simile in the book. It's like their lifespan is just pulled a wire infinitely thin because similar to Bilbo's line about butter scraped over too much bread. That's them to the point that their body literally doesn't exist anymore. And I think it'd cheapen it a little bit if that happens almost instantaneously. If that happens in like a 10-year span or instantaneously, right. I don't think that's as cool. Like, I think there's something terrifying about like, you got what the Numenorians wanted, but at a horrible, horrible price.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's...
You know what I mean?
Because we already know from the trailers and stuff, like, Lindon already exists, like, Region probably already exists, like, Numenor's doing its thing. So I think that would be fair. I mean, we're getting hints at, like, culty people. I think it would be fair to say that, like, Sauron has already swayed some men of Middle-earth.
Sure.
To be working with him, and they could easily become the Nazgul,
Or the Mouth of Sauron. I agree with that. Yeah. Or like a precursor. Like, is the Mouth of Sauron one person, or is that a title, and does it get passed down? I think that'd be, either way, that'd be cool as shit.
Yeah, I think that's true.
It's like, it's the Mouth of Sauron is just one of those characters that always stands out as like, you don't know anything about him. So that's like a perfect opportunity as a filmmaker to be like, okay, we got to like explore this guy because he freaked everyone out and we don't know anything about him if you haven't read the books.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, that's a huge opportunity. There's other ones I've thought of. I can't think of any right now, but like the Mouth of Sauron is a glaring opportunity to make a huge connection to the Peter Jackson films,
Totally agree. Yeah, man. I like that prediction a lot. So, yeah. Do you just want to stay focused on season 1? Like, what are we going to see time-wise in that?
You could. I think that but it's hard to say what's going to be season 1.
I know.
Based on what we've already talked about. So I kind of just think, like, at this point, we've only seen little snack bites, they haven't really told us exactly where they're going with the plot. We've got Galadriel fighting the servants of Morgoth in some way, shape, or form. We've seen a clip from the Bear show that they previewed where, she's like, Sauron was here, so they're already name dropping. So yeah, I just hope that whatever
that clip was from the first episode.
Maybe.
I just wonder. It's like, because I'm trying to think about other TV shows press circuits like that, where like normally they show stuff from the first like couple episodes, if not just the first.
Yeah.
They don't want to give away. They don't want to give anything away about the trajectory of the season. They want to They want to keep up. They want us doing exactly what we're doing. Like, I have no actual evidence for anything I'm saying, except the snack bites that, like you were saying. So, like, we're just going to speculate, and I hope we're wrong. I hope we're completely surprised, and they blow us away with something completely different than what we're.
Yeah, I think like I don't even want to worry too much about Sauron. Like, they're already name dropping him, but I don't even want to pretend like I don't. Have we seen him? I have no clue. Like, I don't want to have seen him.
I don't either. I think it'd be cooler if he's a name, like, keep name dropping him, but we don't see him. This is very like first Harry Potter book. Like, don't see him till the very end, and he's not even really there. Like, he's, I don't necessarily want Sauron possessing somebody and coming out the back of their head, but like, always in the shadows, never in the foreground of the show for at least the first season. I think it'd be cool if he's like unseen until middle of season 2, even. Like, that'd be dope. Yeah.
I could be down for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think aside from like things like set design, which I think we already know that I'm excited for Numenor and whatever the heck they decide to do with Khazad-dûm. Like, they're starting to show like Elrond chilling with Durin,
which I'm into.
Yeah, so I'm like, I hope that we spend. I guess my only real hope for the first season is that we get to spend some time in each of these places and getting like a feel for like the different vibes of these locations, and like what is the difference between Linden and Eregion? Like, you know what I mean? What is it like to be a man of Middle Earth and like someone like Bronwyn versus a Numenorian?
Yes.
You know?
I was also thinking earlier today, like, are we going to see the shadow coming over Numenor pre-influence of Sauron, i.e., like, even before the Pharazôn stuff, like them building havens, good. Mm-hmm. They start to like go full on colonizer though.
Yeah.
Last like 1,000 years or more, like 1,500 years actually of their existence, and that's a really interesting and compelling story. Specifically, if you're going to show the corrupting of the South and the East, mm-hmm. like they're doing Sauron's job for him by being colonizers. Like,
right.
Follow me, have your own strength. This is Sauron talking.
Right.
Combat these people who are stealing your lands and taking all your resources. Like, that's a really interesting morally area for us to examine.
You know, I mean, it's like you think about, if you look at history, right? Like, mm-hmm. It doesn't take too much time to become a colonizer.
It doesn't.
So, like, right. You know, so I'm just thinking, like, maybe we start off, we've got Muriel. I'm ready to fall in love with her character. Like, I don't really know that much about her, but, like, I think she is going to be cool.
None of us know very much about her other than who her dad was and how she dies.
Right. But I think that I'm just thinking, like, maybe I hope that she has like a good amount of time to rule before Pharazôn does anything. But I think that he could easily be like the guy that starts messing things up. Like, whereas they're not having havens anymore, these are now calling in, they're taking over stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's going to be the main based on what we've been given. I feel like he's going to be the main driver of like what happens with Numenor, or like leading them down the wrong path. And maybe he phrases it at the beginning as like, hey, we don't need to, you know, we can do our own thing. We don't have to listen to these stupid elves. Or I don't even know like how you would say it. But
yeah. No, I like that. And then it's like Pharazôn becomes a stand-in for the Kingsmen, the people who like mm-hmm. turn away from the West, as they say. And like you were talking about earlier, just basically want to live forever, versus the faithful. Muriel could be the stand-in for that, but also that's who Elendil is supposed to be. And
I feel like she's going to be a stand-in for like all the kings before, where it's kind of like, perfect, but they're not the worst.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, I think she's going to be, I think the problem that we're going to see with Muriel, this is me just making shit up, okay? Yeah. But like with the fact that she might end up choosing Pharazôn over Galadriel. Like putting like their friends, and like maybe she helps them, but maybe they suffer some kind of loss in helping Galadriel, and she's like, whoa, like I gotta pull back. Pharazôn's making a lot of sense, and then Pharazôn is somehow able to like pull down.
I like that. I really like that, actually, because that would then explain the like cavalry charge mm-hmm. that we saw the clip of. Like, cool. I totally buy that. That's like Muriel giving Galadriel help for something, whatever that something is. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe they go to the south and they try to stop the forces of darkness from gaining power. But then I really like what you're saying. Like, that cost them more than they were willing to give in terms of life or resources or time or whatever. And that's where the Pharazôn types get a stronghold of like, if we're going to do this, we're owed more.
Yeah.
We should rule this land because we freed it, or something, something like that.
Something. And to Josh's point about tying back to the movies, that's something that's in the book and the movie. Obviously, it has to be in the book, but the White Tree of Gondor.
Oh, man.
I don't know if in the trailer, the tree is already like there and doing its thing. But in Numenor, so I can't remember its name when it's Numenor's white tree. Nimloth. Everyone gets a white tree.
A white tree for you. A white tree for you. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And so they have Nimloth, and at some point, Sauron, and this is also probably going to get into like what rights they do or don't have. I feel like whenever we talk about this the next time, we're going to be like, oh yeah, they totally got this much of Unfinished Tales or this section of the Silmarillion or something. But if I really want to see, so Isildur is the one who saves the fruit of of Nimloth in order to bring it to Gondor, and literally like moments before Sauron cuts it down because for whatever reason he doesn't want them to have this tree.
Right.
And so I really want to see him like have that moment of like fighting, and then he smuggles out. It's like all over a fruit, right? But then this becomes the tree. I mean, it's the ancestor of the tree that we see in Lord of the Rings.
Right. Yeah, man, I hope that, I'm imagining that is going to be, well,
it's probably going to be happen right before they have to escape.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I hope they give it that tension, like, it's now or never, like, within the next few days, shit's hitting the fan with, like, human sacrifice and all that stuff, and so the Valar are like, nope. Or Iluvatar, really. But, so that brings up a question about future seasons. Do you think the Fall of Numenor is going to be in the last season or the fourth season? And then, like, if they did it fourth season, that would give season 5 all the runway it needed for, like, the last alliance to become, because, like, they have to establish kingdoms. You know, Gondor and Arnor have to, like, at least get started.
Would it happen sooner? Or would they have, okay, so, like, I think based on, Josh, are you laughing at me?
I was just thinking, like, how funny would it be if it's, like, the first episode? It's like, this is Numenor, and then it fell, and now we're doing the story.
They're just building it all up, and it's like, we're like, oh, finally we get to see it. Oh,
and it's actually just about Elendil and his son.
They just breeze past it, and then they're just doing something else.
Yes, I love that.
We would be like, oh. It's like I got so excited.
Oh man!
I almost wonder, like, okay, well, if we're folding the timeline in on itself a little bit, maybe the start of Arnor and Gondor are already there, and they don't have to rebuild it, and they can just follow Numenor, go live there, instead of having to build.
I could see that, but I wouldn't love it because Gondor and Arnor are, it's special. It's like these people are refugees, but they're like empowering themselves. They're going out and rebuilding a civilization that's in the land that was laid to waste by Sauron. And then, I don't know, like, that could be cool, but I hope they don't do it that way. I hope they...
But otherwise, if they do need to build all these structures, because this is where we're talking, like, Amansul? Like, what the hell is Weathertop supposed to look like? I want to see that.
I want to see Amansul. I really want to see Fornost, of course. That would be great. But, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that's like Isengard, that's Minas Tirith, that's... Like, at what point do they build...
I bet Isengard already exists at this point. I bet.
You
like,
think?
I bet that was earlier Numenor.
Okay.
Because it's built in such a way that, like, no one who's alive in the Third Age, i.e. all the Numenorians that escape when it falls, they, like, don't know how to do that anymore. It's that Tolkien does.
Right,
like,
but when do they build the
I don't know.
gate to Mordor? Because that's built out of the same kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And Mordor, oh man, we're like poking holes in all of the time folding now, because how do you explain that? Like, there wouldn't be the Morannon, there wouldn't be, the Towers of the Teeth, or Cirith Ungol, or et cetera, if those kingdoms don't get established to fence Sauron in. Oh man, oh boy. I don't know. And now I'm afraid.
I know. because I really want to see them build some shit.
Me too.
It's not really lame, but like I just want to see like tink tink. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how they did it, but yeah.
I wonder like how much they're going to be using flashbacks for things instead of actually being in that time period.
Yeah.
So like, you know how they keep doing this thing where they're like, have you heard of Sauron? Like, who's Sauron? It's like, what if that's the way they tell the stories about all these things? And it's like, but then we're like in the present day, which is like, I don't even know when that would be, like in the Second Age or something. But like, but they're talking about like things that happened in the past, you know, and we're almost like at the end of the timeline before Lord of the Rings starts or something.
That's what I think they're going to do if they do the Witcher, like multiple timelines. It's just a question of, do you know that's in the past or not? I think it'd be cool if they left it ambiguous, because then that way, well, I don't know. You'd have to know if they're showing Galadriel in multiple places all over the place. Like they'd have to tell you it's different timelines, or else it's just like, how did she get over there? That's very like last season of Game of Thronesy. If she can get from like the frozen north to Numenor in 2 episodes, that I will hate that, unless it's different timelines. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that could be a flashback.
Dang.
I mean, I do not envy the writers of the show.
That kind of seems like from a writer's perspective, it seems like that could be the easiest way to deal with the timelines without overly compressing them. Like you can just jump around as much as you want then. And it's like, you know, then this happened. And then it's like, let's go back to this to develop this and like, you know, explore what happened, you know, and like be there for this episode or something. And then, I was thinking about that, and that seems like one of the best ways to avoid it just being like really weirdly like sped up. Almost like I always didn't like in Peter Jackson's films when Gollum turns into Gollum, how quickly it happens and you see him like morph on the screen.
Like,
I hope they don't do that, you know. It's like it should be like a long process. So yeah.
It should. I agree. Now I want to like go to the. So interestingly enough, the most information we have, like in terms of what they're going to do with the show, to me, is the soundtrack. Like listening to the music, like what are the musical cues giving us for? Okay, we know Khazad-dûm has this kind of grandiose feel. It's epic the way the Moria music is. You know, Bridge of Khazad-dûm in the Fellowship of the Ring soundtrack. But it doesn't have this air of like, Josh, you can probably like use actual terms here, but like it doesn't feel as I guess stressful is maybe the word I'm looking for. Like they're not clearly being chased by a Balrog when they're in Khazad-dûm. This is more like Khazad-dûm at its height. This is Khazad-dûm when it's like the lovely place we were talking about earlier, where people are welcome and it's, you know, cultural exchange and all that.
Yeah, well, it's almost like in the Lord of the Rings, the way Howard Shore scored Khazad-dûm is the things that are in Khazad-dûm rather than the place itself. And now Bear McCreary is able to like score the place itself, which is nice. There's very few, like he has Numenor, Valinor, Khazad-dûm, but overall it seems like the soundtrack is going to lean towards scoring people rather than places.
Yes.
But the few places he has are like, you know, it's interesting that like he's scoring Khazad-dûm the place rather than the things that are in Khazad-dûm that are going to kill you.
Yes.
Whereas Howard Shore was scoring the fear that you're feeling in Khazad-dûm or whatever, you know.
That's a good point. Wow, yeah. And then events too. We're seeing like, okay, so Sundering Seas, that's going to probably be the shipwreck scene with the sea monster, if I had to guess.
Right. And I still don't know how that's going to come into play either.
Same. Like, where the hell is that how Galadriel gets to Numenor, or is she leaving? No, she has to be getting there with Halbrand.
Does she Halbrand goes with her?
But because they walk in, there's that one scene. Oh man,
you're right.
They walk into the throne room or whatever, and and she says like, "I'm Lady Galadriel of," and
he's like, "I'm Halbrand."
Yeah, Halbrand. Yeah, it's like, and that's the part and and I kind of agree with people on this, like, I'm worried about a potential love interest plotline there, because I don't know, it just kind of makes the elf-human relationships.
I think they've cut some lines that she says to Muriel into there. I don't think all of those things are said to Halbrand.
I agree. I think that is, they're being clever to try to elicit a response, positive or negative. They just want people to be hyped to watch it, to find out what happens.
Yeah. They're almost like, you know what? If people are going to angry watch this, we're going to give them a reason. You know, like...
Exactly. And then watch everyone love it because it's going to be great. But they just wanted to piss everyone off before it started.
I know. Like, the editors are just having a ball at this point. Because... you know, I'm sure the hard work is done.
Yeah.
I don't know. Josh, do you have any initial thought? Because we haven't been able to join before. So do you have any thoughts on like the trailers we've seen so far, or any like hints of things that makes you think of?
I don't know. Like overall, I'm just really happy that there's like practical orcs that are dressed up, rather than like CG so far. Mm-hmm. Like I'm just happy about the things that they're doing that are going to be sticking to why we liked the Lord of the Rings,
the
film adaptation, because it's like we liked the dudes in costumes playing orcs, and like we liked the real, all the real sets and all the real things, and all the trailers have only shown those things. They've shown real sets, and they've shown orcs in costumes, and I even heard that like the guy that played, I forgot the orc's name that kills Boromir, but the guy that played him is returning as an orc.
Really?
So, yeah, that's what I heard.
Oh man!
And he's going to be dressed up and everything as an orc, so that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's the things that I'm really, I mostly care about that, and then like the things we can't see in the trailers is like they can really mess it up with the pacing and the editing and how fast like you were talking about compressing the timeline. If you do that wrong, it'll really not be right. Like it'll really feel wrong, and it won't feel like the epic like saga that it's supposed to feel like.
Right.
So
yeah, I think the thing that is giving me faith is that we know it's 5 seasons. We know that they have like, whether this tanks or not, they're doing 5 seasons, so they don't have to like cram stuff in that they really want to tell a story of without knowing if they're continuing on. So like, I have faith that whatever they do is going to be done logically. I might not agree with all of it. I doubt I will, but it'll still make sense. What I'm afraid of happening though is something that, to make up for the fact that they've compressed times, that they just create 100% new storylines that throw off our perceptions of where things go, even into the Third Age, even in Lord of the Rings. Like, I'm afraid of people, even if all you're ever going to do is watch the show and the Peter Jackson trilogy, I want all of that to still feel at least sort of connected to canon. It can be wrong. Like, I'm okay with it being not canon, but it shouldn't be like, oh, I thought that, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something they completely changed. Like, oh, the elves showing up at Helm's Deep. That change made sense. It created more drama, it created more suspense, and it helped create this feeling, but it also changed our perception of men. It like kept the men are weak thing going, like men couldn't just do it themselves. I hope we see men being represented, by men I mean humans, represented like properly in this. Like, they're supposed to be badass. They're the ones who saved the elves. You know what I mean? Like,
right. I think that it's interesting because while Tolkien, most of the time, he is focusing on elves. If you think about like the amount of time that has existed, and like most of that is talking about what elves are up to during all of that wide amount of time. But then at this, the stories that people most, I feel like, connect to are the ones that center around hobbits.
Yes.
So I think that this is a chance for the showrunners to be like, all right, we've talked about men have been doing stuff, but let's like show the breadth and depth of these guys, and what that looks like. And that's also kind of why I hope that the Pukelmen or the Roses show up, they're mentioned in one chapter in Return of the King, but they talked about how they were there before the men came up over the water. And so, I mean, I hope that we get to touch on, like, there are multiple types, like, cultures existing in Middle Earth, and maybe painting a picture for, like, how Numenor is not only just different, but why they build themselves up to be colonizers.
Yeah.
Where other people are not. Like, everyone else is just doing their own thing, you know?
Yeah. I also hope we see some of that, because there's a theme in Tolkien. I don't remember if this is in a letter or what, but he talks about ennoblement. So we know there's like the hierarchy of like the Ainur made up of the Valar and the Maiar. Then there's the elves that came over the sea to see the light of the trees. Then there's the elves who didn't. Then there's the elves who didn't even start the journey. Then there's humans, and there's all the hierarchy that you already talked about, like the three houses of the Edain, whatever. Then the hobbits. And
we're not that kind of podcast.
No, we're not. Lee, if you're ever on the podcast, you can just correct everything. Yeah. But I want to see. I don't want to see that hierarchy per se, because I'm very much like not into hierarchy in real life.
Yeah.
But I do want to see the exchange of, like, we have been blessed with more information because of our proximity to the divine. So here, let us help you.
Yeah.
I want, like, the story that the English, the Spanish, and the French told themselves when they were colonizing the New World, quote unquote. Like, I want some of that to be not true, but like believable.
Well, it's like the narrative you tell yourself in order to commit these acts,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And so it's never, I don't think it will become this like, wow, you guys suck kind of thing. But I think that the way that we're seeing, I hope that it's almost like we start off being like, yeah, Numenor's the best, and then it's like, wait a second.
Well,
like, what are you doing? That's
exactly, because like names. Oh man, I think that's in the letter in the front of the Silmarillion 131. I think he says the themes of Lord of the Rings and like his overall work are the machine and fall. So like he's really obsessed with obviously like the Saruman line from the movie is like what is it, like drive the machine of war with you know the line I'm talking about when he's talking to the Urukai army. Anyway, that's one thing. Like, what does it mean to, like, what is progress if it's leading to worse industrialization and destruction of nature and things like that? But then falling. So, like, we see that with Feanor. We see that with Sauron. We see that with Morgoth. We see it, like, all of it is people who had a chance to be the best of something and they fall. Very, like, John Milton, Paradise Lost style Satan. Mm-hmm. And I agree. I say all that to say, I really agree that we should see Numenor as a beacon of hope and light,
right?
So that when they do the bad stuff, when they go very much the wrong direction, that should hurt us. That's what
I'm gonna say. Like, and also that people have been talking about, like, oh, I don't want Lord of the Rings to have any nudity, or like I don't want it to be like Game of Thrones. Do you understand that Sauron gets hold of a whole nation of people? Yes. Like, he gets people to, like, human sacrifices, and, like, it should get kind of dark, y'all.
It should.
If Sauron is who Sauron is in the books, you know. Mm-hmm. And that'll also be interesting, because Sauron has always been this just, like, menace, right? Like, this just evil, you know, like, just in the air almost, you know. We know that he has a physical body, but in the books, it's in Lord of the Rings, you know, he isn't, like, around in the same way that he should be present in this. So that'll be interesting. One thing that we haven't talked about, I think that this show, if it does what I would like, is that, you know, focusing on, like, the multitudes and multifaceted sides of humans, but also dwarves. That's another gap in the history.
Yes. And dwarves, I get why he did it, but like dwarves should not just be a punchline for comic books. Like they are a noble race of people with a really compelling backstory. Like the origin story of dwarves is so awesome. And we get like the teensiest bit of it in the movies, not really. We get a little bit more in the books, but there's a lot of blank canvas for them to play around with. As long as they're not like messing up how it is, I'm so excited to see what they do with dwarves. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that'll be so cool especially when we're thinking about these themes of fellowship and, you know, I think the thing that many of us, you know, really love about Lord of the Rings is that it's these different people who may not always have the same cultural background or beliefs or whatever, but they come together and they do some cool shit. And that is literally this, like, the dwarves and the elves in part of this. So, I think that will be really nice, and maybe even explain some of the animosity that they have later on down the line. Like, I wouldn't say excuse it, but just talking about like why that exists in the first place.
Yeah.
Especially if your only real relationship between elves and dwarves is Legolas and Gimli in the movies, and it's like I'll never see the ring in the hands of an elf, you know, like stuff like that. That's my John Rhys Davies for you.
Oh, he did so good.
He did so good. Love him to death. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there as well, and you know what it means to be, because you know we're gonna have Celebrimbor, who is obviously a master craftsman, but like the dwarves are also very much that, and if not more so, as far as like everybody's doing it. So that'll be cool.
It will. Josh, I've been, knowing that you're a composer, I've been wanting to pick your brain specifically about Bear's choice to use Middle Eastern scales and instruments in the Numenor music.
Yeah. That's just Bear McCreary in general. So that is the most Bear McCreary thing about the score, is that he's known for this thing where he does these soloistic ethnic instrument lines, and then like when there's like action happening, he ends his phrases with this dotted rhythm that always happens, this bum 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 bum, you know, and then like it goes to the next thing. He just always does that. That's like Bear McCreary in a nutshell. Soloistic ethnic lines and ending things with a dotted rhythm to like mess with the, you know, with the expectations of the music, I guess. So it's like I don't really know, like I'm interested to see how that like fits in as a score, like how he's gonna score it, because to me it doesn't sound super Lord of the Ringsy. It sounds very Bear McCreary, but like that could also be a really great thing, the way it like fits with the visuals, you know what I mean?
Totally.
So I don't know. There are certain tracks.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you finish. I was cutting.
Yeah, well, I was just saying, like, there are certain tracks that like the Galadriel theme and the Khazad-dûm theme, where he kind of disappears a little bit, and you don't actually hear that it's Bear McCreary. And in a lot of ways, I think the Galadriel theme reminds me of Jerry Goldsmith more than anything, which is funny because Bear McCreary always, like, he adores Jerry Goldsmith. It's like his favorite composer ever. So that's really cool. It sounds like Jerry Goldsmith wrote that theme to me. Just the way it's like written. There's not even a particular song of his that I'm referencing. It's just the way the orchestra is like orchestrated and the way the phrases are written. It sounds very Jerry Goldsmith, you know?
Yeah, because when we were talking about that, we were listening to some of Jerry Goldsmith's scores from like the 70s and even like up to the 90s with like Mulan, and there were elements of that present in the Galadriel theme.
It's just very like, also a lot of people have referenced Alan Menken as like, you know, what it kind of sounds like. So like the guy that did like every Disney film ever, like Aladdin, Hercules, you know, just like anything you can think of, he did that sound. And I hear a lot of Hercules in the themes that are really uplifting. I hear like stuff that sounds very like old Disney, you know, and it's really cool. I love that stuff. And then there's like, you know, the stuff that's like the folk songs, that's like one of Bear McCreary's like strong points. He's all about those folk instruments and folk songs, and so I really love, you know, the I love the stuff that is obviously like centering around the proto hobbits or whatever you call them, like the Brandyfoot theme and stuff like that. Like they're really cool. And then the song, the Wandering, Wandering Day or A Wandering Day, yeah, it's just really, really good. And that's also a good reference to like a quote that all Lord of the Rings fans know, regardless of if you've read the books or not. Like every bumper sticker ever has not all who wander are lost on as a quote. So like
first time I heard that, I teared up because that's such a lovely moment in the book, like the poem that Bilbo wrote about Aragorn, and then seeing that as like the quote that so many people love. I just was like, what a good choice lyrically. Like that was so cool. Like that's everyone's gonna, whether you like it or not, you're gonna be attached to that moment in that song.
And that's one of the things that I see, like we're starting to already see these references already, and I love it because it's like I know some people are like bemoaning the fact that they don't have the rights to the Silmarillion or the Unfinished Tales or whatever, but honestly, you get some more stuff, but you know what I mean, like when it comes to what people know about Lord of the Rings, it's mainly in here. So the fact that they were almost forced to dig deeper into the text to be like, okay, how can we use this but make it second age? Like how do we take these lines and retool them so that it makes sense for earlier? And honestly, I think so far, I think it's gonna be beautiful to see how they do that.
I agree, and also I'll quote Corey Olsen and Maggie Clark. Like, we shouldn't worry so much about rights because they're working with the estate.
I know.
So they are able to go and say, this is the story we want to tell in this direction, and we need, like, they can make allusions to things that happen in books that they don't have the rights to, but if they want to make an outright reference, like a name and things like that, they need special permission. I have no doubt in my mind that that's going to happen, especially unfortunately, with Christopher passing and Priscilla passing. Like, I just don't think the people who, like Simon, I'm sure is, living up to his grandfather's legacy, but he probably doesn't care that much about, like, you can have the right to show like the darkening of Valinor, which I'm pretty sure we're going to see, even if it's just like 10 seconds.
Right.
I'm so excited for that. I won't even get into spoiling that. That should be like raw information for people who don't know the story. It's going to be so cool. But tangent aside, we know that they're going to make direct references. And so, like, I'm just not that, like, when you see something when you see Finrod and you're like, they don't have the rights to Silmarillion, what are they going to do? They're going to just ruin that. Like, shut up. Like,
but also,
but
luckily, in the very beginning of the appendices, we get a Finrod name drop who gave his life for Beren, and we do get, so if he did that, but we also have Aragorn telling the story of Beren and Luthien and broad strokes to the hobbits. There's stuff, you guys. So that's what I'm saying, is that like they had to kind of dig. Like I know that they were reading the Silmarillion on the set, and I know that they have this knowledge, but then that almost makes them be like, they know what to look for in Lord of the Rings, so that they can kind of like weave this all together.
Yeah, it's like a list of clues in a scavenger hunt. Like, here, read the Silmarillion, not to use it, but to use it as because like, there's dozens, if not hundreds, of subtle references to the Silmarillion in Lord of the Rings, because if he could publish it, so he was like, I'm still going to throw in this line about Orome, and the feat of Naher, like when Theoden is leading the charge of the Rohirrim. Like, oh man, and there's so many little things like that. So like, that tells me two things. When someone makes that kind of argument, they don't have the rights, and therefore it's going to suck. That tells me that they just want to be mad.
Right.
And they might not actually know the text that well, and all they know is what is in what book.
Right.
Like, the original telling of anything to do with the Valar isn't the Silmarillion. Well, multiple Valar are referenced in Lord of the Rings. So, like, we're totally going to get Varda / Elbereth name dropped. We're probably going to get Olmo and Orome too.
Oh, like, yeah, 100.
Gonna happen.
Yeah. So I'm excited for what that means for, I know we've been talking for like an hour, but if we want to say just like a top couple things that we hope to see, I am excited. I mean, obviously Sauron is one of them, but I'm really excited to get to know Galadriel as a person and not just this ethereal being. I'm really excited to see how they introduce things like Valinor and like the depth of Tolkien that is it's like we get the bigger themes in the Lord of the Rings films, but I think that they have, with 5 seasons, that they can give us a little more depth that we don't get with the Peter Jackson movies, as beautiful as they are. And I'm really interested to see how, aside from our discussion around Numenor and dwarves, like that's going to be cool. And I also, I love that they're including hobbits. I know that they're not necessarily like a part of the tales, right? But I'm really interested to see how they weave them in there in a way that makes sense to lead us to Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
You grabbing a book?
I am. You know who I am.
I know.
Well, because you mentioned the hobbits, and like I think we talked about this in a chat once, like in the prologue, in concerning hobbits, it is unequivocal the 3 peoples that then make up the hobbits of the Shire in the Third Age existed in the First Age. They just didn't influence any of the stories.
But now you say that, oh my god, we're gonna be here forever. I'm sorry, everyone, but
I'm not.
I know. You say that, and it makes me think, how many times, like The Hobbit, for example, that influenced a lot of things, but nobody took notice until for 60 years, right? How many times will they give us a reason or give us a something where the hobbits influence something that happens without anyone realizing it?
I would love that, actually, because it's a perfect example of this the small hands like turn the wheels of the world, and that often means that those small hands, like, you don't know
nobody notices.
Like, you don't know the name of the person who invented the wheel, but maybe that's
right. I know what you mean.
Like,
yeah, but you don't know the name of the person who picks up your trash, probably.
Exactly.
Not that the hobbits are doing that, but like you don't know the name of the people.
Trash, that would matter a lot.
I mean, Josh and I were just talking about, like, there was a strike in New York City, like, many years ago where, like, the trash was piled up to, like, the size of buildings or something.
Oh, yeah.
Josh, you probably remember it. You were the one telling me this story. I'm retelling it. But you know what I mean? Like, the people doing the things that really matter at the end of, like, that keep things going, Yes. Yeah.
There's one there's one sentence it's like the second page of the prologue. The beginning of hobbits lies far back into the elder days that are now lost and forgotten. And the elder days, by and large, is pre-First Age and First Age. So, like, there were little people in Middle-earth pre the sinking of Beleriand. I'm just, like, definitely. It's not like they evolved, quote unquote. Like, this is a creationist story anyway. So, like, evolution.
They just were there.
Yeah, they were just there. But yeah, like, it just shows how much people care about being mad. And I know that's not the point of this episode, but like, come on, people, like, just think a little bit.
It's hard to escape. Yeah,
it is. Josh,
but you can escape by listening to this podcast. So, Josh, what are you most looking forward to? Yes. I mean, as a fan of movies and me talking. Default fan.
I mean, I'm obviously most excited about the score, and I think in a lot of ways, the score to Lord of the Rings is the only thing we don't have that's like added. In a lot of ways, like, Peter Jackson adapted the films, but he adapted a thing we already knew about, but we had never heard anything because Tolkien Tolkien doesn't know anything about, he even said himself, he doesn't know much about music, and like he didn't give us anything as far as like what the melodies sound like to his folk songs that he wrote and stuff. And what Howard Shore gave us was the sound of Lord of the Rings and the sound of their culture. And I really hope that Bear McCreary, I think he is doing that, but I really hope he really tries to capture that, where it's like you're capturing a culture of something that actually existed. That's like the idea behind the music, you know? And yeah, and I think we brushed over the Numenor thing a little bit, but like I was gonna say that the reason, like, it's not just that it's just Bear McCreary that does this type of thing, you know. The actual reason I think that he chose the sound he chose is, I think there's like a I wonder if there's something where like the creators told him it needs to have a more ancient sound or something. Who knows where that started? But I think it's very inspired by like Greco-Roman sounds, like a Roman influence. And so I think that's, in a lot of ways, that could be Bear McCreary's choice, but it also could be like, we need it to be like the Rome of Lord of the Rings, like something that's more ancient than what we've seen, you know. And so maybe that led him to this Greco-Roman influence, and he's like the perfect guy for that. His whole thing is he uses ethnic instruments, and you know, he's Armenian and he loves to use Armenian instruments too and stuff. So
here for that.
Yeah, I think it's a Greco-Roman thing. I think that's the origin of the idea, and I think it would fit really well, you know.
It's almost like you knew that that's what Tolkien wanted Numenor to feel like, because he did. He wanted it to feel like Rome or even Egypt, like ancient Egypt. And so it spot on. Like you're so, like, as soon as I heard that, I don't know what instrument it was, but as soon as I heard it, I was like, wow, they got that right. Like, that's so encouraging to me that is the air. You're right. Like the ancientry, and I'm just excited to see that.
Right.
And then, like we were talking about, I'm excited to see it crumble. Like, we get to see, I mean, Numenor is quite literally Tolkien telling the Atlantis myth. Like, it's him just taking the Atlantis myth and putting it in the context of his world.
Yeah.
So we get to see that happen and why the gods sunk it. Like, that's so cool. But one way they're going to give us cues for the ancientry without showing all several thousand years of its existence is through music. Like, it's going to give us that feeling, even if we don't know anything technical. It's just going to feel older and wiser and deeper, I think.
Yeah.
Are you excited for anything else other than the score?
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I mean, I'm just really glad that it's going to be practical stuff. You know, I'm really all about the visuals and like the sound and stuff. And since I don't know the like source material as well, I don't really care as much, as long as it's an endearing story and as long as it looks really good and feels like Lord of the Rings, like the way that Peter Jackson's felt like Lord of the Rings, you know?
Agreed. Yeah.
It's such an interesting task, right? Because when you take something like a book that can have so many different interpretations and evoke so many different feelings and so many different people, but it obviously has struck a chord because it's like one of the most translated books ever, you know. But then you have the job of like trying to distill that into a movie, and so we're kind of getting that again, where it's like the same but different. Like, you have to still feel like Middle Earth somehow, but with telling like a completely new story with a few familiar characters.
Yeah.
I also I really hope, I don't know how much the show is going to center around evolving Sauron into what he becomes or whatever, but like I really hope that we really hate him by the end of it. I want a reason to really hate this guy. And like in Lord of the Rings, we're just given like you're supposed to not like him because he's a bad guy and he's spooky. I want to see like the really atrocious shit he does, you know. That leads to that.
Same.
So,
What Andy said earlier, like, it should get dark. We should see the things that we should be afraid of him. Like, I want to be scared when Sauron is on the screen in the last few seasons. I want to be a little afraid. Like in Game of Thrones, when the whites were on the screen, especially in the last few seasons, I would like shake. Like, I was so like excited for what was happening and terrified. They did a bunch of like
what nastiness they're gonna do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes me think, like, because what's interesting about Sauron in the Second Age for me is that he is not appearing as Sauron a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so the guy that he is pretending to be for part of it has to be likable.
Yes.
Lovable, even. You know, he
Yes.
has to eke his way in there and become someone that a person like Celebrimbor would trust and rely on, and then to just totally throw it all out the window. And like the way that Celebrimbor dies is not nice. It is not pretty. So it and I don't necessarily have to do it the same way that it's described in other works because of the way that it is, but
Right.
it does have to go from this was your guy. Like, I think you should almost believe that. Yeah, like you should believe that Sauron cares about somebody for him to, like, you know, in like whenever we do things with Vikings, I feel like we always make this reference to when they like eagle somebody. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the eagle, the blood eagle or whatever, where they like rip out your lungs and put them up like eagles and leave you out to be eaten.
I just feel like it's like a devastating image. So I want it to go from like BFFs to that to your BFF. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the vibe. And then he continues to go on to trick the leaders of Numenor, and does some horrible stuff there too. So, but I think that the Celebrimbor thing will probably be our really. That should be the moment where we realize what Sauron is capable of and like what he actually cares about.
Yes, but I also want him to be creepy from the get-go. Like, I want the audience to be like, what are you doing, Celebrimbor? Like, no, don't love that guy. But not because we've seen him do horrible things. Or maybe we do. Maybe we see him do something horrible not off screen, but like, I'm trying to think of an example here. Like, I guess Littlefinger in Game of Thrones is a good example of this. Like, he doesn't always do the most heinous things, but he might do a really good thing and the next day do something really heinous. So he's a very complex evil character, but he's not just bad all of the time. He's conniving and he's smart. And I want Sauron to feel slimy that way, but also have it make sense that people do love him. And that way the betrayal and the fall of Eregion and the people there is like, that needs to hurt. That needs to like come crashing down on us so hard. Yeah.
Agree. Are you ready to be devastated, Josh? I don't even know if they're going to go there, but we'll see.
Well, they
will. I hope. I mean, I'm just like, you know, my favorite stuff is like really dark horror films and stuff. I want this to go dark. I want it to be like spooky, and I want it to be gritty and, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think we're going to get that. I don't know how much we will in the first season. I know the creators said to the people in the UK, this has been said on so many podcasts, I'm sure I'm not breaking the rules saying it, but they need it, like, it gets dark. So they need they need like the change from light to dark to really impact us. So it's not going to be, well, it's probably going to be dark right off the rip with things like Galadriel placing the helmet on the mound of helms, and you know, like that's going to be like sad dark, but it should very quickly start to be seen that like despite things feeling peaceful, like bad shit's right around the corner. And so like I want this like back and forth. I'm excited for that back and forth. Like we're probably going to get, it's going to be like a Star Wars movie. Like you'll see a scene with Darth Vader, but it'll actually be, you know, in this world, it'll be some evil character before they introduce Sauron. And then the next scene, we'll see like the Harfoots. It'll be sweet and happy, and then whiplash us back and terrify us or make us really mad or sad or something. You know what I mean? Like take us through the roller coaster.
Right. Yeah. Man, I mean, I know like at one point in today's talk we got a little nervous about like what the timeline compression meant, but overall I think we're in for a ride, and I'm ready. I mean, it's been a long time, you know, since we've had something like this in the fandom, whereas something like Star Wars, we're getting new TV shows and movies all the time. And
yes.
So
and I'm glad that Bear McCreary got the score, like the job, because I don't know if there's anyone on Earth that I would rather have it if it's not Howard Shore. And there's there's people like Michael Giacchino that could maybe pull it off, but I kind of think he kind of just rips off John Williams a little bit in the Star Wars he's done. And I don't just want him to rip off Howard Shore. I want it to be new, and Bear McCreary is the perfect choice for that. So I'm really excited about that.
Whatever they do with the story, all signs point to the production being fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see familiar but different costume designs. Like the elves should feel similar to what we know from Peter Jackson's, but probably a little more unique and a little more I hope there's a distinction between the Linden elves and the Eregion elves, for example.
Right. Yeah. Agree. Man, I am really going to try to put this episode out ASAP, but we are so close to September 2nd. It's
wild.
It is. I mean, I feel like this has been years of buildup. I went back to I can't even remember when it was, but it had to be pre-2019 or something when they released the map that showed Numenor was going to be a part of the story.
Yeah, when was that? Holy crap.
A million years ago, because then I was trying to look on the Rings of Power Instagram, and they started releasing names of actors and stuff a year or two ago, and I was like, okay, but who are these people? And now you go back and you look at those headshots and you're like, oh wow, that's Galadriel, and that's
yep, so funny.
It's wild.
But then so all we had for the longest was the maps and the headshots and names, and that we didn't really have very much else. And then they started dropping stuff, and it was it was coming out, it felt like the longest time between each, but looking back, it was so quick. It was Super Bowl to now is not that much time.
Yeah, this year's been wild. It's been I have been overwhelmed a lot of the time with the information dumps that they've done. I'll be I can't even think about it because there's too much.
I know, it takes me a week to wade into all of it. And I have not read all of the articles, because at some point you're hearing the same quotes over and over again. So I just kind of get rid of them. But new images, new trailers and teasers, I'm on it. It's so fun to analyze. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
anything you're worried about?
No, I'm not worried yet.
I'm not worried. Until I see an episode, I'm not worried, because I don't know what to expect other than...
I honestly just don't have the brain space to worry about a TV show.
No, you're so right. It's why are people worried? If it's bad, I'll just not watch it, or I'll
turn it off. Wow.
Yeah. If I don't it's not going to ruin the thing.
Right. It's not the fall of Numenor isn't going to happen. I just imagine your apartment caves in on itself and it's oh, Tolkien's ruined now. Books flying. That's not.
They went back in time and killed him.
Yeah.
No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. So I think we're good. Josh, are you worried about anything? I know sometimes you come up to me and you're I don't know.
I'm just kind of in general, I've been won over, and now I'm excited about the show over the last, probably, I don't know how many months. Mm-hmm. But previous to that, I was expecting the show to just suck. I actually just thought it wasn't going to be worth watching. And I've been converted, and I'm a little excited now. But at the back of my mind, I'm still a little anxious and hope it's going to be done right. And, I know they can really mess it up still, even though we've seen what we have. And it's Amazon, and I was let down by New World, and a lot of people were let down by Wheel of Time, but I know it's not Amazon that's making it, it's the people they hired that are making it. And so it's
Amazon's the bank, but
yeah. So I have a lot of hope, and I'm actually super excited about it now. And so if it is bad, it's going to let me down, and I'm going to be sad.
Oh. It took so long for you to get here.
Well, we have how long? A week?
A week.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's well. Yeah, I mean it's like a weekend. 1, 2, 3, 5 days.
Is it the second?
Yeah.
Well, it's actually the
it's like
first.
over.
Oh, why did they do that to me?
So it's a little over a week. It's like
Week and a
next
half.
week.
Next
week it's coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point. Next week it's coming out. So there you
go. There you go. That's right. So, yeah, I'm sure we'll try to put something together with the crew to talk about it afterwards. But until then, we'll see you on a regularly scheduled episode where we talk about Lord of the Rings proper, like not Rings of Power. So yeah, we're all in this. We're all in this together. I don't actually know that song, but I know that part. And thank you for listening. Thank you both so much for being here and like leaning into my wanting to talk about the show outside of like everything else. So I appreciate you both. And I'm gonna stop recording now. Okay.